I would like to now officially introduce Dr. Marks and actually myself, because I don't feel like I've done that yet. So my name is Allison Winnike. Good morning, everyone. I am the president and CEO of the Immunization Partnership, and it is really my great pleasure to join all of you in our conversation with Dr. Marks. And again, it's just very informal. And so Peter Marks, thank you, joining us. As a little bit of background, he received his graduate degree in cell and molecular biology and his medical degree at New York University, and completed his internal medicine residency as well as his hematology and medical oncology training at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. And so over his career, he has worked in academic settings, teaching, and also caring for patients, as well as working on the industry side on drug development. And Dr. Marks began his career with the FDA in 2012 as Deputy Center Director for CBER, the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, and became the center's director in January 2016. And so welcome, Dr. Marks. We are so happy to have you here. I'll turn it over to you if you want to, just say a few brief thoughts about what's going on in the world of immunizations right now. And before we kind of open it up to see if folks have any questions for you.
Yeah, so thanks a lot. So there's not very much going on these days. Things are just kind of, yeah. So it's been quite an exciting year during the past year. Obviously, COVID-19 has brought with it tremendous challenges. One of the challenges that I think we've seen the system rise to is rapid development of vaccines to address COVID-19. I think watching us go from having a newly diagnosed infectious or a newly identified infectious agent essentially at the beginning of 2020, and then having a vaccine that was deployed before the end of the year, pretty impressive. And I think the most impressive piece of it for me is that we can, I think with confidence say that we did not cut corners in demonstrating the efficacy of our emergency use authorized vaccines, and that we've put in place very good safety monitoring to deal with the one thing we couldn't do is you can't get 6 months of safety follow-up in 2 months. Just that somehow it doesn't work. But what we did do was put in place very good safety monitoring. And I think what we're seeing right now are the fruits of having that safety monitoring in place. For instance, with what recently happened with the Janssen vaccine, being able to very rapidly pick up a signal, understand the extent of it, discuss it, and understand how to risk mitigate. So a lot has happened in the past year. We still have a long way to go because now we'll be working through some additional vaccines that will probably find their way to either an emergency use authorization or towards a license application. And even more importantly, we'll have to make sure that we get vaccines in people's arms because I think that may turn out to be getting the, I think what we've got is that we got the early adopters that got vaccinated, and then we kind of had the middle of the group that's been getting vaccinated, but we've got to get to the late adopters sooner rather than later. I'm not sure, whether we need to, I'd love to try to get to as many vaccine hesitant people as we can, but that will be a challenge. I think last night I was on a webinar for which this is my first time I was ever on a live stream Twitter feed thing. I was Instagram. I'm sorry, it wasn't Twitter. It was live stream Instagram. That shows you. They keep me off of social media as much as they can. But the vaccine hesitancy is a real problem. And what was really amazing about it, though, was that much of the hesitancy was based on factual, just plain old misinformation or disinformation. And so, and I have to believe that if we, you know, I'll stop here and then we can open it up. But I have to believe that one of the most important things we can do is be patient with people and work through this. Actually, that was actually kind of interesting. It was one of the few times, one of the great things about social media, you get feedback really fast. I think people appreciate just the patience of having a scientist work through the myths without getting angry or short-tempered. It's very easy to get angry or short-tempered, I can see, and I don't blame anyone, because when they sit there and listen to, well, but we're told that these vaccines have to change our genetic material. No, mRNA, it's a carrier molecule from DNA. It goes from the genetic material, it goes to make protein. It can't do the reverse in a human cell. It just doesn't get into the nucleus. It doesn't have reverse transcriptase to get into the DNA. It's just degraded shortly after it gets in. Just being calm about it is really important, because I think we sometimes, my lesson over the past couple of weeks has been that we're going to have to be patient if we want to get to the vaccine hesitant, and not be upset at their questions. And I've had questions, serious questions, ranging from the microbots to do they cause infertility and everything in between. So it's been an exciting time, and it's been a constant learning time for us. A lot of different factors. I mean, there's the science, the hard science, and then there's the soft science and the social science. So lots interacting.
Well, thank you so much. And that was really some great insight about the vaccine hesitant folks. I'll tell you, we know, in the population, even pre-pandemic, there was a chunk of the American populace that was vaccine hesitant, but that did really grow during the pandemic and with the development of these new vaccines. And so we are sort of facing some new issues during a pandemic. I would like to open it up to Dr. Melanie Mazoon, who I believe has a question for you, Dr. Marks. Oh, wait, hold on.
There we go.
Okay.
So my house is being painted and there's all kinds of noise that may appear in the background. I apologize. I have a couple questions. The first one is, does the EUA status make it harder to mandate the vaccine? Our organization, I'm Dr. Melanie Mazoon, and I manage immunizations with Kelsey-Seybold Clinic, and we're considering mandating the vaccine for our healthcare workers and employees. And tangential or partial to that question is, when will it become a fully authorized vaccine rather than emergency use, so that we can be more confident that when we mandate it, people won't have a legal loophole?
Sorry, now it was my turn to be muted. You're spot on correct, is that under emergency use authorization, although you can mandate it, you're on a little bit, a private firm or a private group, as opposed to public, can do that. You're not on quite the terra firma that you are on when we have a biologics license application. Once a biologics license application has been approved, then everyone, including the United States government, for federal employees, can mandate it. We can't do that now. In fact, in the federal government right now, we can't even ask if someone's been vaccinated. So it will make a difference, and we understand that. The lucky thing we did was we told all of the manufacturers of these vaccines who submitted EUAs that they should be prepared to submit BLAs not too long after they submitted their EUAs. And we're going to probably see the first of those in the not too distant future. And then, since all of these will have priority review, probably after something is submitted, probably within 6 months or so of that, we'll see we'll see an approved vaccine. I wish we were able to do it faster, but the applications are very, very large. And they have to do with a lot of the information is manufacturing information. For vaccines, there are all sorts of, for a license as opposed to an emergency use authorization, we specify a certain number of batches that have to be made perfectly, et cetera, and all that has to be documented, et cetera, et cetera. So it just takes longer to get through that. We're going to try to obviously do it as quickly as we can. We just would rather underpromise and overperform. We've approved these in the past. I think when we had the meningococcal B outbreak on college campuses, the meninge B vaccine, I think we approved those in 3 to 4 months, and we'll try to get it done in the same time. We just can't promise because there's so much. It's not usual that we have this many vaccines that we're juggling all at once.
All right, excellent. And I see another question. Let's see if I can open it up there for you. There you go.
Hi, Dan Friedman. I'm a pediatric neurologist in Austin. Thanks for talking with us. I have kind of a tough question. I love the mRNA technology. I think it's really cool that I'm glad, I guess the silver lining of this pandemic is that we've brought this technology to the forefront, and future vaccines and cancer therapies, all that stuff can be really useful. I was wondering, because of the reactogenicity of the mRNA vaccines, do you have concerns that there are things that we may not have seen in the trials that we might see now as we roll it out to millions and millions of people, like exacerbating seizures or other autoimmune conditions or something like that?
Yeah, really, really great question. So you're absolutely right. We have to be able to look in, even though the trials, these were large trials, between the two mRNA vaccines together, and they are slightly different, but if you pull them together, you had 35,000 people exposed to vaccine before we gave them emergency, they both had emergency use authorization. But you're right, in larger populations, will we see signals here when we look? So that's one of the reasons why we have worked with CDC, and we have this very nice overlapping set of safety surveillance systems in place. So we have obviously the typical vaccine adverse event reporting system. That's just the MedWatch, but you don't really, for what you're talking about, you don't really pick that up there because it's hard. People don't know whether a seizure was, whether they have the seizure normally or was it from the vaccine. So what we also have is we at FDA have 2 collaborations, one for older individuals with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services to use their database to look for we have 15 different events, including, and it does include a number of neurologic events because those are seen sometimes with other vaccines. So things we see, and it includes GBS too. So we will look to see if there is some difference in rate in vaccinated individuals versus non-vaccinated individuals and versus a baseline. Additionally, we will, that sounds like my house sometimes. And additionally, we have another system called the Sentinel Best system. It has over 100 million lives that it's monitoring using claims-based databases, and quite a number of tens of millions of those are linked to the EHR, and that's for the younger population. We'll do the exact same thing. So we will be querying that. The first time we'll be able to really query it with having enough information is probably in the May-June timeframe, because till now there just wasn't enough. There wasn't enough data between number of people vaccinated and length of follow-up. But we will actually post, we have a website for Sentinel Best, and we will post publicly the results of those and whether we see any signals that we're refining. So it's a great question. I'm hoping that we don't see any of that, but I think you're right, given your point's well taken, that, I would be most worried about that in the first several days, because you do get fevers in about, about 15, 20% of people, and some of them are somewhat higher fevers. And could there be some difference there? So we may pick that up sooner, even through the CDC's VSafe system, which is that text-based system that some of you may have already registered for if you've gotten vaccinated. So really great question. And, the good news is high level, things look really good, but we always are looking to understand if there's any safety signal whatsoever, and then try to find ways to mitigate it.
Oh, thank you so much. That was a great question, Dr. Friedman. I see several other folks have questions. Allison Connolly, I'm going to go to you next. Let's see if we can get you unmuted.
Hi there, my name is Allison Connolly, and I am on the board of the Immunization Partnership. I am a mother of 3 young children, and I was curious if you could talk through the process, how the vaccine trials in children differ from those in the adult population. And as a follow-on to that, in anticipation of having our children vaccinated, how quickly do you expect that process to progress now that it's begun?
Great question. I'll try to move quickly, since I know that people have questions. So the children over the age of 12, we're treating very much like adults. I know it's pediatricians hate me when I'm an adult internist, but 12 and up, because of the weight and what was seen in phase 1, which was done over the summer, we're using the same dose that we're using in adults, and everything would seem to indicate that it's both safe, at least for the mRNA vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, safe, and that you get a very good immune response. So I would suspect that we'll see in the not too distant future, can't say how many weeks, but in the not too distant future, we'll see 12 to 15-year-olds getting vaccinated with the first of the mRNA vaccines, and then the second mRNA vaccine and the adenoviral vector vaccine will follow for that age group. Which is nice, because I think that will allow us to, hopefully for the fall, get junior high school and high school students vaccinated. For smaller children, we have to be a little more careful. And that's because we want to have more safety follow-up, more duration, and we want to make sure that we're not going to see anything like this multi-system inflammatory disorder if children get vaccinated after having had COVID, or vice versa, get COVID after getting vaccinated, for those who might get it if they were not protected. So the follow-up would be a little bit longer, which is why we probably won't see the 2 to 12-year-old age range getting vaccinated. It's hard to say. If everything goes really well, it could be late fall. It might be early winter. It's just too hard to say at this point, because of the way the trials are being done very systematically, with not just 2-month follow-up, but 4 to 6 month follow-up, because we really want to make sure that that we don't get into issues with safety in that younger population.
All right, great question, Allison. I know we're all really looking forward to when we'll have those vaccines available for our little ones. So excellent. Let's see, we have another question. Let's see, Barry, see if we can bring you up here.
Here we go, I'm unmuted. So I've got 2 questions, and I want to apologize. I had to call in late. I was on another call, so I missed some of the call. So my 2 questions are, what other pipeline vaccines are we likely to see? And what would be do we have any sort of prospective timelines on those? I'm particularly interested because I was actually a subject in the Novartis trial, in the Novavax trial. And then my second question actually relates to that also. So that trial is now using a crossover design for the people getting placebo. There's been some speculation that with now having vaccines which we know are effective, that the trials ought to be non-inferiority to proven treatment rather than placebo trials. Is that on the horizon?
So all great questions. So let me start with the easy one. Yes, I think Novavax is probably one of the next vaccines that we expect to see as an emergency use authorization. And I don't know exactly, I can't tell you exactly when the company may have announced, but I suspect it's going to be late spring, early summer when it comes in. But they will probably know better than we know. And that would be very nice to have a protein-based vaccine. Some people who get, to quote someone I work with, some people get really wigged out about mRNA vaccines and they don't like taking viruses. But if you tell them you're just giving them a protein, they feel a lot more comfortable. That's okay. I mean, I think that's
Even
fine.
if that protein, I point out to people who say that what they're doing is they're taking a GMO.
Anyway, but it would be nice to have those protein vaccines, and it does happen to be that there are adjuvanted protein vaccines, but that's the next wave. They are using a crossover design. I do suspect that in the United States, you probably will start to see these non-inferiority designs, or it's even possible that we may start to see immunogenicity studies with correlates of protection by the time we come around to the fall. But certainly, I think the non-inferiority designs we'll start to see those. It's true that in places outside of the United States where vaccine is so limited, you can still do randomized trials in a reasonable manner. I think it's just too hard to get them done here and get the inclusion. It will be hard to get the inclusion of those that you'd like to have. We already know that the latest wave was very challenging to get enrolled.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, and I know Dr. Moore, I think you had a question as well.
So good morning, I'm Linda Moore from Houston Methodist Hospital. And my question to Dr. Marks is, given that we're learning now that there are some populations who are not responding very well to the mRNA vaccines, what is the plan for helping improve that response in those for those individuals? And is there discussion about how to manage this issue?
So I'm going to take it you're talking about people who have some form of immunocompromise or equivalent, right? And so there were studies, exactly, great question again. All these are great questions. So there are studies that are now that are getting started that I'm aware of that people will be looking at whether there are two different ways of going about it, either giving a higher dose of vaccine or giving additional boosters. It may be that that we'll see whether additional boosters for the mRNA-based vaccines. It'll also be interesting to see whether there are any differences because we still don't know yet how well. I'm not aware of a great amount of data in the immunocompromised with the adenovector vaccines, and we also will have to see what the protein-based vaccines do. But for right now, people are very aware that we need to look at that. As I was a leukemia treater when I practiced for a number of years. I was the head of leukemia service at Yale, and that to me that would be a really interesting question, because you know that people with particularly even people with not active disease but just kind of living with chronic lymphoid leukemia probably will not make a really good immune response, and trying to get that as high as you can is probably a good thing.
Yeah, we have seen even in our immunocompromised patients, even with the annual flu vaccination, that they need the higher dose. So we're not surprised. We're a little disappointed in our patients' response to the vaccine. We also are seeing a more robust but reduced response in those patients who are not immunocompromised by drug-induced immunocompromised, but have chronic end-stage disease. So that's another large group of our population, and they're not typically tested to see if they've developed the antibodies. So
And
We're concerned.
all good points. All good points. You know, some of the trials did at least get the more common, some of the more common comorbidities. Like the large trials generally had a reasonable complement of people with diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes and hypertension. But you know, unfortunately, you're right. What I always worry about is people. I do know that there were concerns when people had multiple comorbidities, because it becomes kind of almost an additive issue about getting a really good immune response, it seems, in some. So that is something will have to be addressed.
Thank you for taking my question.
No, sorry, I know the work is ongoing, and unfortunately, I think in the rush to get towards a vaccine for everyone, had we planned a little better, some of these studies would have started, you know, a couple months ago, but at least they're getting started now.
Thank you so much. That was a great question, Dr. Moore. So I am sad to say that we are out of time with Dr. Marks this morning, but I am just so thankful for you joining us today, hearing your great insights, the fantastic questions that we heard from our group. So thank you guys so much.